GM, everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today is Wednesday, the 11th of December. Let's get straight into the price of Bitcoin, and we can see that Bitcoin is still hanging on here. So we're just about hanging on to this ascending trend line. We're still, believe it or not, following our path. So obviously, I've got for the price to mark up fairly soon from here. I'm thinking to myself, actually, we might chop a little bit further sideways just due to the fact that the market had come off more so in altcoins over the last few days. But I think potentially we might just need to build out a little bit further here before getting this pop higher. So, like I say, we've got CPI today. Someone actually corrected me on yesterday's video. It's not FOMC today. It is next week, next Wednesday. So it's actually, I was getting confused. The CPI is today. I think, look, CPI is probably not as important as it has been over the prior months when obviously inflation was sort of more of a hot topic. The conversation and attention has really now moved to what the Fed's going to do. Are they going to start adding assets back onto the balance sheet, or are they going to continue to offload them? So I think probably the FOMC next week is going to be more impactful and meaningful. Obviously, in the interim, there's all sorts of narratives going around with Bitcoin and Bitcoin being added as a asset to the balance sheet of certain companies such as Microsoft and Amazon. Apparently, Microsoft shareholders actually voted against doing that yesterday. I guess a no today doesn't mean a no forever. So potentially this is just one more bullish catalyst that we've still got on the deck yet to play. But yes, Amazon also is also being proposed to their shareholders too. And of course, we've still got Trump coming in next month. He's going to bring in a lot of very crypto-friendly people into the administration. And also, there's still the talk and the rumors about this Bitcoin strategic reserve being proposed. So, look, I think whilst we still have these bullish catalysts on the horizon, it's very much a bit of a buy the rumor, sell the fact situation here, where I just think I expect this market to stay fairly buoyant. And I think any dips will get bought up fairly heavily. We certainly know we've got one person, a serious billionaire on the bid in Michael Saylor, and obviously the MicroStrategy purchases that have been occurring. I think all the data suggests that they're probably set to continue over the next few weeks and months. So I just wanted to give a little bit of backdrop, more of a fundamental backdrop as to why I'm still remaining fairly bullish over the next month at least until Trump gets into office. And who knows, when he actually comes in, we might get some volatility, we might get a pump up and then get a bit more of a pullback, a bit more of consolidation before potentially running even higher. I don't see this market flipping bearish for the foreseeable. Like I say, Q4, Q1 tend to be very good quarters for cryptocurrencies. And like I say, we've got other factors coming into play. Potentially, the FOMC could really send this market higher if they announce they're going to start adding assets back onto the balance sheet. And also, we've got likely a rate cut coming next week. We've also got Trump coming into office, more talks and conversations around Bitcoin as a strategic reserve, and just really the general sort of adoption of crypto that we seem to be seeing on a regular basis. The other day, there was a story about sort of Goldman Sachs saying they would start getting into Bitcoin and Ethereum, provided they get the regulatory approval to do so. Well, the regulatory landscape is changing in real time right now with these appointments that Trump is making to the office, and we got a lot of crypto-friendly people about to come in, which should be a bullish tailwind for prices going into Q1. So there's it's almost hard not to be bullish right now when you sort of think about it in a logical way. And of course, I'm fully conscious that when the information and the data gets so extremely bullish that there's no more bullish news that can come out, that's often when we top. So normally the market tops on extreme bullish news. So whether this is actual confirmation that the US are starting to buy Bitcoin or definitely have announced they're going to be forming this strategic reserve as this moment that is just insane, sort of max hype, max over exuberant behavior, and we see the market then roll over, or whether it's something else, whether it's Amazon agreeing to set up a treasury. I think sort of these sorts of headlines tend to come out around the time that we see major cycle tops. So I don't think we're there yet. But I think we need to be mindful that we're getting into the later stages now of this bull run. Things are starting to get very bullish. The news feed is starting to get very bullish, and this can continue for some time. But at a point, we need to say, okay, this is going too far, too fast. I don't think we're there yet. I think Bitcoin probably runs up to well into the deep 100,000 territory, potentially up to 120, 130,000. Cycle targets for me are getting me up to upwards of 160, 170,000 per Bitcoin this cycle. I will come up with a video later as to why I think that. But yeah, I just wanted to start this daily GM off with a little bit of a different approach, just looking at some of the fundamental factors to state why I'm still bullish. Obviously, the technicals are still important too. And looking at where Bitcoin is at now, look, if Bitcoin can continue, and I said this yesterday, to push on here, closing above this 99,500 level on the daily close, preferably a couple of daily closes above this level, I think there'll be no holding back. I do think that we will take out the all-time high, and we've also got another sort of level coming in. Just kind of looking at this chart, we can see that if we were to connect sort of these highs, this is going to sort of give us a bit of a pennant that we're now forming. So obviously we've kind of gone from sort of this pennant, breaking out from this, coming back, retesting, still holding this upward trend line. But I think Bitcoin could just sort of grind on from here, and eventually we'll make another pop higher. Potentially we come down for one more sweep lower. I think if we do come down, I think 95,000, 96,000 likely gets bid, and obviously that will be a higher low from where we were here. And just to support that, you can see the 12 hours. So these are only liquidations over the last half day. You can see we've got some down here at 96,000. So I'm thinking, do the market makers come and grab these before potentially going on higher? If we look at the sort of 1 week liquidation heat maps, obviously this shows us what liquidations are here from the last 7 days. And like we can see, we're now starting to see sort of the larger amount of liquidations building up above price here, especially above 100,000 up until 105,000. So yeah, I think potentially in the short run, and if it happens, I think it probably happens today, we get a push down to 95, 96,000, taking out the last bit of sort of liquidity just below price. And then I think we likely start to grind higher and move towards these liquidations up here and a potential all-time high for Bitcoin. I still think it happens by the end of this month. If we just look at our sort of funding rate heat map, we can see that funding has fully reset, and yeah, right now this is looking healthy. Obviously, this means that if funding's reset, then we've got a lot less leverage longs on the price. Obviously, with leverage longs, they always have a liquidation price or a stop just below current prices in many circumstances. So, of course, if there's not the if there's less leverage long in the price, then this is obviously a healthy thing. There's obviously less liquidity below price for the market maker to target. So I think the market maker will start to target the upside. It's just whether we get another sell-off. Potentially, we see a bit of a dip at the open today, and then we start to push on higher. But yeah, I'm standing by my calls. I think the low for December is likely in. I still don't think we go below 87,000. probably we don't go now below sort of 90,000, 91,000. And certainly if we can get above 99,500, call it 100,000, then I think we will probably push on for another leg higher this month. So that's Bitcoin. Just looking at Ethereum, we can see that Ethereum, if we move on to actually, we'll stick with the 4 hour because obviously things have been very volatile and a lot's been going on. You can see I've been sort of putting some of my own sort of shorter term fibs on this with sort of actively trading Ethereum throughout this move. But you can see that things are starting to recover in terms of Ethereum. Like I say, is it possible that we sort of move sort of back up to this resistance here at around 3,850, and then potentially do we try for one more sweep lower, coinciding with Bitcoin coming down to around sort of 96, 95 for a final test at that level? Potentially we do. But yeah, I think just looking at Ethereum on a longer term, really we want to get back above this trend line. Hopefully we do it this week or within the next week or two, and we can confirm acceptance for Ethereum trading above this trend line, and then we can move back up towards our yearly highs at just above 4,000, around 4,100. And I think Ethereum probably continues from there up to around the 4,000 sort of 800, 900 level. If we just go onto the weekly, we can see obviously we've got previous all-time high coming in here at 4,867. So I think at some point Ethereum does make that move. Obviously, direction for Ethereum is largely going to come from Bitcoin. It looks like Bitcoin is starting to sort of lead the market in terms of this recovery. Solana, that had been relatively weak, is now starting to bounce fairly strongly today. So obviously Solana proving to have more volatility on both the upside and the downside to Bitcoin. And it looks to me like Solana likely makes another attempt at the all-time high when Bitcoin does. And I would think that once Bitcoin breaks out, Solana probably starts to outperform again. That seems to be what we're seeing today, certainly on this bounce. So yeah, a little bit mindful of another retest on the lower for Solana, but I'm starting to think there's a higher probability now that the bottom is in for all of the majors. If we look at Pepe as well, we can see that Pepe, interestingly, sort of came down a little bit harder the day after the rest of the altcoin market did. So it had quite a drop yesterday, but again, it seems to be bouncing. It's come down. It's tagged its 618 Fibonacci just front run it. Just because I was looking at this yesterday, I actually opened up some more longs on Pepe here and added to my main leverage long on Pepe. So I'm looking for Pepe to get back above this level, call it sort of 242, which we're just off now, and start to get back towards the high, well, it's all-time highs, back towards that sort of 2.8 handle. And then from there, I think Pepe probably runs on with the rest of the market. Pepe has definitely been one of the strongest tokens, let alone one of the strongest meme coins over the last few weeks. So Pepe looking good here. It's also important to touch upon Bitcoin dominance. So if I just go on to the daily on Bitcoin dominance, actually 4 hours probably better, just to see the path that's been drawn. So you can see we talked about Bitcoin dominance potentially having one more retest before seeing more of a breakdown. The move is starting to play out pretty much as we said, backtesting into this sort of consolidation here and now starting to reject. So I'm thinking to myself, if Bitcoin does start to pull around from here, as we've already seen, we've seen the altcoins starting to come back to life, even just with Ethereum and Solana today, starting to bounce a bit harder. And obviously, if altcoins do recover faster, that will put pressure on Bitcoin dominance to sort of fall again and take another leg lower. So I actually think that Bitcoin dominance does probably roll over from these levels. maybe has one more spike higher. Certainly, if Bitcoin comes back down to retest, say, sort of 96 or 95,000, potentially takes one more pop higher, and you get a bit of a last chance to add to any altcoin positions. But yes, I think we're probably close to a local high here for Bitcoin dominance. And this would coincide with obviously Bitcoin going above 100,000 and altcoins absolutely ripping and exploding to the upside, which would ultimately give Bitcoin dominance its next leg down. So no change there, really. I think this probably does happen, like I say, as soon as the end of this month. Potentially, we could come a little bit higher if Bitcoin decides to consolidate and chop a bit more, and this could get a little bit choppy for an extra week or two, which would push this back into January. But I am thinking that, yeah, with altcoins starting to bounce fairly strongly today, that we might be starting to see the next leg lower in Bitcoin dominance start. And just looking at the dollar here, so the dollar is pushing up a little bit. Obviously, CPI might give this a little bit of direction. If CPI comes in hot, i.e. higher than expected, we might see the dollar rally a bit, as this would mean there would be less leeway for the Fed to cut rates and stimulate the economy, because obviously more stimulus would create a higher risk of having more inflation. Therefore, dollar wants, obviously, if there's higher rates and there's less stimulus, this is better for the dollar. Obviously, the more dollars they print, the more they devalue the dollar, and the lower they cut rates, obviously, the less interest you get on holding dollars. So, yes, a more hawkish Fed would be better for the dollar. So, let's see what the inflation read is. I expect if the inflation read does come in hot, the dollar will tick up slightly. If it comes in under, then we could see the dollar start to come down, with traders then starting to front run FOMC next week and potentially some stimulus being announced. Stock market on a little bit of a pullback here, so likely waiting for the waiting for the CPI print. Again, I think this will give some direction. So a slightly lower CPI number would probably result in us moving higher. I think honestly, if CPI is in line, I expect these markets probably do make their way higher. As long as we don't have a sort of much higher inflation reading, that would put markets under some pressure in the short term. If we have a much lower reading, then we might get a bit of a pop higher, but then it becomes, look, is this a sign that the economy is in some sort of trouble? So I'm expecting the best case scenario for markets would be a slightly lower inflation reading today, or something in line. So let's see what happens with that. And the Nasdaq obviously just flat really for today. Stocks both flat for today. Obviously, there's been a little bit of a pullback on earlier this week, at the start of this week. So yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up there. Obviously, just going back to Bitcoin, let's go back to sort of chart with our path. And like I say, nothing has really changed here. I'm still expecting new all-time highs for Bitcoin within the next week or two, definitely still before the end of this month. So Bitcoin seems to be re-accumulating here and starting to look like it wants to push higher. Like I say, there's risk of one more sweep lower down towards 95,000 to take out some of the liquidations over the last 12 hours. Otherwise, we've got more liquidity and liquidation build up above price here. So I do expect, now that the longs have been wiped out and punished, especially on the altcoins, that the shorts now start to get targeted by the market maker over the next few days. Obviously, altcoins are quite interesting here, with them taking such a battering. So I know for myself, I've started to re-enter some altcoin longs I had de-risked following the sell-off. But yes, I think if you are bullish, this market is doing what you want it to do. You don't want it to rally up too fast, too quickly. You just kind of want things to be fairly steady and start to sort of grind their way out of here and eventually sort of recapture key levels. And Bitcoin is starting to do that, obviously recapturing this ascending trend line, getting back into the range, now starting to push back up, sort of above 98,000, back towards $100,000. So yes, we shall see what CPI brings, whether that sort of pushes us on. Let's see. And I'm going to leave it there. So thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed today's stream, please do smash the like, subscribe if not done so already, and I will talk to you all on the next one. GM.